My name is Michael, and this is my bride, Melinda. We've been married for 13 years, and we have two girls, 9 years old and 6 years old. And today we're here to share a story of hope with you, and we would like to just share our story from our hearts about how we recovered from what we thought was something that we never could recover from.
So I grew up in an environment where I was defined by my activities, by my accomplishments. I really am a perfectionist at heart and was very naturally talented in athletics and academics. And so I quickly realized that as an insecure child, I latched onto my accomplishments and the accolades, the recognition, the trophies that I would earn through my activities. That definitely carried me through elementary school into high school when in awkward situations I found alcohol to become a crutch to really numb some of the pressures and stresses that I was experiencing in the academic world, in the athletic world, and really just feeling a little out of place socially. That I carried through high school and into college, where I met Michael. We met in college and dated for the majority of my college time. And again, alcohol was definitely a big part of who I was on a social level, really masking the Melinda that was hiding deep down under the layers of insecurity. Michael and I ended up dating more seriously after college, and ultimately we got married in 2002, and everything was really fantastic. College had been a phenomenal experience for me, playing collegiate volleyball and performing exceptionally well, exceeding just at high levels. And when I graduated from college and entered into the workforce, it was awkward. It was, again, another level of insecurity where my definition in sports and academics had gone by the wayside, and now being in the workplace, I was having to really start from scratch and figure out what was going to define me in that workplace. So Michael and I were married. We were engaging in lots of social activity in terms of happy hours and just barbecues with friends on the weekends, but not really living a deep life with one another, just a really superficial life together. But everything was great. It was fine. We were okay with that, not communicating about anything heavy at all.
Yeah, I was very much focused on work and trying to strive for financial gain. Money was where my focus was, and it really created a disconnect between Melinda and I. I was so focused on things outside of our marriage, and really was not ever focused on growing in an intimate relationship with Melinda. We were just operating in our own separate worlds. We would come together to socialize and have fun, but other than that, we were both fighting our own fights.
Yes, so after 4 years of being married, we welcomed our first daughter into our family, and that was extremely exciting. I was ready to be a mom by that point, and I think we knew we needed something a little bit deeper than what we had experienced for those initial years. And with the arrival of our new daughter, my life changed dramatically, because I went from being a career-focused individual to now being ambivalent of, do I stay in the workforce or do I stay home with my daughter? And again, just kind of what had become my definition over the last several years in the workplace was being challenged. And my heart truly told me that I wanted to be home, to be a stay-at-home mom, and to just pour everything that I was into this new wonderful blessing that had come into our lives. And that brought upon its own challenges. Feeling like there was no real recognition for the sacrifices that I was making every day, but also in my perfectionism, wanting to feel like I was the perfect mom. And with this new little being with their own mind and their own needs, I didn't have control over something that I really wanted to be able to control. So, I don't think we really encountered too many problems in that early stage of parenting, but I was not communicating even the minor stresses and the minor dissatisfactions that were in my heart. So I was bottling everything up inside me, and that would prove to become extremely detrimental after the birth of our second daughter in 2009. So by that point, here I now have a 3.5-year-old who is extremely anxious socially. She definitely struggled with some separation anxiety and made it extremely challenging for me to ever get away and to ever just feel like I could do things for myself. And now I have the second baby who obviously needs attention and my energy, and I entered into a world of just feeling more overwhelmed than anything else because I had isolated myself from community. I felt like my first daughter was extremely high maintenance and needy, and it was awkward for me to be in social circles, even moms groups and things like that, because I just felt like I was an anomaly, like my child was more high maintenance than everybody else's kids. And so I had pulled away from any sort of social circle where I could find rest in knowing that other moms were probably experiencing something similar, but I wasn't even putting myself in that place to hear their stories. So I turned to exercise. I, having been an athlete my whole life and competing at the collegiate level, athletics and fitness had always been extremely important to me. So I felt like that was one area where I could just pour myself into and started to really just become obsessed with altering my physique. And it's not like I had gained a lot of weight with babies, but I just knew that I had enough of the little bit of baby weight left that I was determined to put my focus, put my energy into exercise, into having control over something that I could actually control.
And as that was going on and Melinda started to put her focus there, around the time we had the second child, we had moved into a bigger house and into a neighborhood that we wanted to be in. And so that started to put some of the pressures on me to provide for the family. So again, my focus was on work, on earning more money, and trying to make us comfortable in that sense. I always thought and felt that I was a good husband. I thought I was a good father. And I was just, doing those things minimally. I was being a father minimally. I was being a husband minimally, not really focused on those things. And so as she was moving towards pouring into exercise and things outside of the home, and I was focused outside of the home, again, our disconnect just grew bigger and bigger. I knew that we were growing apart, but I just didn't think that we were in a dangerous place.
So with my focus being on exercise, I would leave the house 2-3 mornings a week at 4:45 in the morning to get to the gym by 5. I would get home just in time for Michael to pull out of the garage and get to work on time. So any bit of my good energy in that early morning time was spent at the gym, away from home, and certainly not with Michael. By the time he would get home at the end of the day, I would be drained from being with the kids all day, and so then I would be pretty grouchy and just not in a place where I would want to have any sort of connection or communication with him. In fact, I would pour a glass of wine or two as I knew he would be coming home, because it was just a way to transition from the tension of the day into preparing to be with him for the evening. So again, there was just a huge wall growing between us. I realized that I had a lot of unstated expectations for Michael in our marriage, and therefore a lot of unmet expectations by Michael in our marriage. But again, not pointing the finger at him, because I was not a good communicator. I grew up in a family where if something wasn't quite right, we just swept it under the rug and didn't take the time to really address it. And I felt like I definitely carried that into our marriage. Anything that I felt dissatisfied about, I just stuffed. I figured, oh, it'll go away. I just want to have a non-conflict marriage, and I want to just keep the peace within our family. So all of these unmet expectations in my heart were creating sadness, disappointment, frustration, and ultimately anger that turned into contempt, just resentments that walled up my heart so dramatically that I didn't realize as I was going to the gym on a regular basis, I was developing this infatuation with somebody else at the gym, something that was purely one-sided. And each day that I would go to the gym, I would definitely have more than an awareness of this other person. And that resided with me for quite some time until I finally stepped over the line and just introduced myself to this man. And there was a certain connection just in terms of the intensities of our workouts and the activities that I would observe him doing and that I knew I was engaged in as well. And so we just had a common place of exercise and high intensity workouts and things like that. So that really began a year-long emotional affair, and it was simply defined by mornings at the gym, by chit-chat during the workout, but turned into, lingering a little longer after the workout to just have longer conversation. And before I realized it, that emotional affair turned into just a complete obsession of this person. All I could think about was this other man. And I was wanting to be at the gym even more frequently. So gone were the 2 to 3 days a week. It was almost every day of the week. I mean, even on a Sunday afternoon, I would find an excuse to get to the gym. And the resentments in my heart enabled this, because I remember in one of the early stages of starting a running partnership with this person saying to him, I want you to know I'm happily married, and this is just about running. But clearly I had stepped over those bounds by choosing to take that relationship to an extra length.
So at that time, as that continued, and as Melinda's time away from the house increased in the length of time in the mornings and the Saturday mornings, growing into longer times, she would be late coming home here and there. I started to get suspicious and had a feeling that something just wasn't right, that she just wasn't in the marriage the way that she had always been. And there were times, this was late in 2012, as I remember asking her to please stop these runs, please stop leaving the house on Saturdays. I don't feel comfortable with this anymore. Would you, and she was too far gone. There was nothing I could say or no requests I would make that she would accept. She was deep into what she was doing. I still trusted my wife, like I thought that I should and could, and so I never really thought that she would cross the line, but I was getting worried and suspicious. And she'll share a little bit more about the the specifics of the affair, but it did turn into a full-blown affair. And in December of 2012, it was December 21st, 2012, just before Christmas, I received a phone call at my office from a strange number that kept calling, and I ignore my phone typically. And finally, I picked up the phone to see who kept calling multiple times, and it was her affair partner's ex-wife was calling to tell me what was going on. She said that she felt bad that we had young kids, and she wanted me to know what had been going on for several months. And I was just floored. I just could not. I was like, is this really happening? No, this is not really happening. Part of me, though, felt like the answer to this question as to where has Melinda been for so long, why has she felt checked out, this kind of gave me the answer to those questions and those concerns, but I still just didn't feel like that it was real. Like, this couldn't happen to me, this couldn't happen to our marriage. Everybody around us constantly told us what a great marriage we have and how we seem like the perfect couple and the perfect family. And so to have all the walls come crashing down on that day during that phone call, that started quiet the process, quiet the journey for us from D-Day in December of 2012 to today. But I do remember on that very first day, not knowing where else to turn or what else to think about. I do know that I had probably my first conversation with God in a long time, and that was, what do I do here? And I want this marriage to work, Lord. And so I remember hugging Melinda that night, and the hours after I was told of what was going on, I said to her, I know that I want to forgive you. I know that we can make this work, and I want this marriage to work. So really from that first moment forward, I was into the idea of making the marriage work and forgiving her.
Yeah, so about a month before Michael received that phone call, I can vividly remember thinking to myself, I can't keep up this lie. I want to tell Michael what's going on, but it also came from the perspective that I want out of this marriage. I am done. Michael is not who I choose. I wanted to let Michael know that I was really leaning towards divorce. And in that same month, so it would have been November of 2012, we found out that a very close friend of ours was diagnosed with cancer, and any inkling that I had to come out and tell Michael the truth, I just stuffed down further, because I didn't think that two very tumultuous bits of news could really be passed on to Michael at that point in time. So I never had the opportunity to share exactly what was going on with Michael, but I do remember that day when Michael found out, and thinking to myself that I was relieved that he knew, relieved, I guess, that I didn't have to tell him, but I also didn't know which angle to take that day. I knew that I loved my family, and that divorce wasn't necessarily what I was choosing that day. So with Michael's forgiveness, I decided that I would try to end the affair and give back to my family. I knew I needed to do the right thing, and that was to, on my own willpower, choose to end the affair. I was addicted to this other person, so my willpower did not last long. This other person was like a drug to me. All of the stresses of life, he was numbing those stresses for me. So clearly this was a stressful time, and I quickly realized that without my access to him, I was miserable. I was literally just experiencing misery, what I thought was the most miserable state of my life. And I reached back out to him, and I reignited what had been quiet and had been basically buried for about a month, and realized that I needed him, that I wanted him, and all the while was still grappling with the right and wrong side of things. So Michael had at one point given me the idea that if he found out I was active in the affair again, that he would want to pursue divorce, and I didn't want that control taken out of my hands. It's like if we were going to get divorced, I wanted to be the one to make that decision. I didn't want that to be forced upon me. So in my own fear, I called off the affair again. And this time on my own willpower lasted a little bit longer, but again, when push came to shove, I reverted, I relapsed, I went back, because again, anybody trying to recover from something on their own willpower is not going to last long. Our willpower is limited. And so Michael and I just reached a place where I was really starting to push for separation in our marriage. I knew that I did not want to live life without this other person, and I was willing to take a more drastic step this time. I was willing to pursue being separated, and ultimately in the back of my mind, that was the first step to divorce and to getting what I thought I wanted in my life as happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, so as she said, this was now in May of 13, about 6 months after, 5 or 6 months after our D-Day. And it was time to sit our girls down and tell them that that mommy was going to be living in a different place, that she was moving into an apartment. And again, talk about the pain, sharing this with a 6 and a 3-year-old at that time. And having this conversation with them is something that I wish I could forget, but I just know lingers and lives on as a moment of true pain, and something that I wish we never had to do. But we told the girls, and we put them in the car and drove them over to the apartment and showed them where they were going to be spending half their time. And from that point forward, Melinda and I were separated and started to pass the children back and forth as if we were divorced. And it was just a difficult time for everybody, for them, for me. I know it wasn't an easy time for Melinda, but it was what she was choosing, and it was giving her the opportunity to continue to pursue the affair as she had chosen. But so we're living separated for a few months as it trickles into late 2013. I know there were times when I felt like there was just no way that Melinda and I could ever reconnect again, that she was gone. I heard from various outlets that when a woman chooses to step out of the marriage, and especially to engage in a physical affair, that she's not coming back, that there's never going to be this chance to reconnect with your wife, that it's something that can't be fixed. And I refused to believe that lie. I refused to believe that story. I refused to believe that ours couldn't be different. And it was a long process, and it was a painful time. There were nights when Melinda had the girls and I was home alone in our big empty house and feeling lonely, and but where I was finding encouragement and where I was finding strength was just in one or two other people who were walking closely with me and were fighting with me for the marriage. It wasn't, I excluded people who wanted to try and fill me with lies about, you deserve to be happy, leave, she's gone, shouldn't you get rid of her? What she's done to you is terrible, you should just be done with her. I wanted no part of that, and I refused to hear those lies. And so I remained faithful. I remained focused on growing my relationship with God and putting my trust in Him. And on nights where the girls were with me, and I know that Melinda was away at the apartment doing her thing, I know that she was involved with her affair partner. It was incredibly tough moments for me to be a single father, to raise the kids, to give them some focus. and to not just lose myself in the painful thoughts that of what was going on outside the house at that time. And I had learned of affair recovery and had it in the back of my mind as like a card that I would play at some point when it was finally right, or when I just it was all that I had. Actually, I wanted to share that I did feel like there was nothing that I could do. I did file for divorce in May, just because I thought there was no other answer. But I did have God, as I was starting to still hear from God and grow a little bit closer to God during that process. I shared the story with a friend who I had grown apart from, and I knew that I needed to share this story with him, and I did. And that was he helped me make a complete U-turn in the way I was looking at things and what I wanted to fight for. And he led me to God, and discipled me, walked me down that path. But quickly, after starting to talk with him and to take this new approach, I did take the divorce off the table and said, that's it, no divorce. It's not coming from me. So we get a few months down the road, and I finally ask Melinda. I build up the courage. I pray about it for a while, and I ask Melinda, hey, if you're not ready to file for divorce, it's been several months. It's time that I ask you for something. And I asked for her to come to affair recovery. So this was in November of 13, I couldn't believe it. She said yes. There must have been something inside of her to have her say yes, but she did. And so we went to Austin and we started our journey there with affair recovery.
I remember when Michael asked me about affair recovery, and I still knew that I was pursuing a path away from Michael, and I felt like agreeing to attend affair recovery would help me check off a box on a list of saying, I tried, I did put forth some effort, and I can confirm and validate for you that I do not want the marriage. I know that I can move forward in a new direction. So the reason why I came to affair recovery was certainly not to fix our marriage, was not to figure out how to end my affair because it was still fully active at that point, but rather to appease Michael. And I remember arriving at affair recovery and just processing the messages that were being shared and realizing that it wasn't all about the marriage, that there was a lot of pointed information about the individual. And I enjoyed that aspect because I knew that I had room for growth, and I was definitely interested in fixing some of my problem areas so that I could be the best person that I could be in a relationship, just not with Michael. But leaving affair recovery, leaving the weekend, Rick agreed to work with me one-on-one to continue digging into more of my personal issues that I was trying to uncover. And I was really blessed after, I would say, about 2 months of working with Rick, that he decided to have me join a Hope for Healing group. In all honesty, I was hard-headed and very hard-hearted, and my stubbornness just really showed Rick that he wasn't going to make much progress with me one-on-one. So he relinquished me to the Hope for Healing group, and really that's where I was able to broaden my horizon and just kind of start to peel back layers of what I had come to be at that point.
Yeah, so Melinda starts Hope for Healing in,
February of 2014.
February of 14, and so that's so that was a positive sign for me. That was something that I could grasp onto and say, well, I know she's still involved in the affair, but at least she's doing Hope for Healing, and that gave me some strength and encouragement to continue to be patient and continue to struggle through passing our girls back and forth, and what that felt like for me to be alone in the house and those sorts of things. So it was incredibly difficult, but hanging on by a thread and hanging on to this hope that that she's hearing from others, that she's in a community, she's surrounded by godly women who hopefully are speaking some truth to her, and hopefully it's starting to get through to her. However, we make it through the 17 weeks or whatever it was, and she's in July of 14, and Hope for Healing is finished, and Melinda is still choosing to stay out of the marriage and to pursue divorce.
So I filed for divorce and was very confident in my decision at that point. Again, in a way, Hope for Healing was about that personal gain for myself, but about checking another box to prove to Michael that I put forth the effort and my heart still hadn't changed, so it was okay to pursue divorce. I think that was definitely a guilt factor or a guilt prevention factor for me, and especially as it would relate to our daughters, that I didn't want to give up and throw in the towel without being able to say that I put forth my best effort to see if there was any reconciliation possible between us. So after filing for divorce, we quickly started meeting with a mediator, and we went through about 4 mediation sessions over the course of about 5 weeks. It was pretty quick. But through each mediation session, I remember just having a very matter-of-fact attitude, just, okay, this is what we need to get done in order to get closer to divorce. Michael didn't want any part of it. It was excruciating for him each time we were in the mediator's office. But all the while, we were going through the mediation and even through the Hope for Healing, and from the time that we attended a fair recovery, so we're talking about a 8-9 month period of time, that a lot is happening within me. Even though I'm still pursuing the divorce, there are just these internal conflicts and battles going on inside my heart, inside my head, pondering, am I actually going to regret this in another year? I knew that it wasn't going to be an area of regret a month after the divorce or 2 months after the divorce, but I had fear of regretting my decision down the road and not being able to turn back from that. God was definitely at the center of those questions, of those doubts, because going into really the stress of our disconnect was a lack of unification over faith. Faith had been important to me in our marriage, and it was one area that I didn't choose to bring up in conflict, to challenge Michael to say, hey, I want more out of our faith together for our family. And it definitely bubbled up at this stage of decision making. I was pondering, what does my life really look like after divorce? And do I preclude myself from having a relationship with God, from having a good relationship with God after I pursue the divorce? And salvation was a question in my mind. I hadn't grown up with a deep faith background to truly understand what salvation is all about. So a fair recovery was a catalyst for change within me, because it opened the door to ask more questions, to dig deeper, to really just challenge myself in areas that I had assumed were fine to live the way I was living. I reached a point after listening to online sermons and becoming more active in a new church through this process. Even though we were separated, we were actually still attending church together every weekend, and we had attended a new church, so that was really making a difference in each of our lives, each of our individual relationships with God. After I filed for divorce, even though we were attending the same church, we did choose to start sitting apart from one another because that just took away from really Michael's experience of being in worship and being present on Sundays. But it was after our very last mediation session. I left the mediator's office, and I just knew at my core that I was about to do something that just went against the purpose for which I had been created. I felt deeply and confidently that pursuing the divorce was contrary to my being made for this world. And I had reached a point with God that I could actually call out to him and just say, Lord, I don't want the path that you're going to take me on, but I know it's your path for me, and I trust you, and I will trust you with this because I will not be able to do it by myself. I can't do this. I need you to do this with me. And I emailed Michael that night.
Yeah, so we had our last mediation session on a Thursday night, and I show up at work on Friday morning, and there's this email from Melinda that shocked me about as much as the phone call had shocked me, a couple years back. But the email says, I want this to be over. I want the affair to be done. I want to come home. I want to grow old with you. I want to raise our kids together. I want us to cry together. I want us to vacation together. I mean, I remember it very specifically, but I couldn't believe that I knew that it was God that had cracked her heart, and here she was reaching out on what seemed the very last possible time she could, and I accepted her, and I accepted her back right away. We took one walk after that email. We talked about it, and we decided she was coming home the next day, and we closed up the apartment pretty much, and worked on that behind the scenes, ending the lease and that sort of thing. But she was home, 2 days after this, and it was incredible to know that our family was back together under one roof. That started even a new chapter about how we were going to start a new marriage, and how we were going to have a marriage that thrived, not just what it was. We had to grieve the old marriage. We had to put it behind us, and we had to understand that, and we were both on the same page that we were choosing God's path for us, to stay in the marriage and to work on the marriage. We knew it was going to take a lot of work, and we knew that there was not going to instantly be a connection between Melinda and I. But I knew that this is what I wanted, and this is what she had chosen to come back, and we kind of just laid some boundaries down about patience, and me knowing that she wasn't ready to start back in on an intimate relationship with me, that it was going to be a process, and so we started to communicate about those things. We started to just understand that it was going to take time, and she started to really immerse herself in things that were positive for the marriage, and I could see that. And all the while, I was working on me and making sure that the places where I fell short as a husband and as a father, that I was humble enough to address those things. It wasn't just about Melinda's choice to have an affair. We both had things to work on as we came back together to start this new marriage. And so it's been several months that it's been a little over a year, 15 months, whatever it's been, I guess, of living back together. But God continues to bless us daily, and it was a patient process with her being back home and knowing just how long it would take for us to reconnect. I can't stress enough that without patience and whatnot, it would have put a burden on our attempt to reconnect.
The feelings that I had for my affair partner were definitely feelings of, he must be my soulmate. I could never have feelings for Michael again. Those were the fears that I felt in making that decision when I emailed Michael to come back home. And I can say today that feelings I had about this other person, thinking that it was perfection and soulmate and the fear of not ever being able to connect with Michael, those were lies. I was buying into lies, and I never could have imagined a year and a half ago that Michael and I would have the marriage that we have today. I didn't even know to dream for a marriage that Michael and I have today. We are connected. We are one in purpose. We are able to connect emotionally and physically, and the desires that I have for fulfillment and happiness are not put on Michael. I don't look to Michael to make me happy. Yes, we find happiness together, but it's because I'm actually looking for the satisfaction in my relationship with God. I choose to prioritize God and Christ above Michael, above everything else, and I carefully choose what I allow to influence my life. It was so easy to get caught up in the world with music and movies and literature and things like that before my affair and even during my affair. I was so influenced by where I should find happiness, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to sit here today and to be blessed by Michael as my husband and the beauty that we're experiencing every single day. The beauty that we found in our marriage, with our family, but really not because of anything that he has done or anything that I have done, but because we give that to God.
Again, I encourage anybody who's in a similar shoes to keep fighting and to not believe those lies. As Melinda will tell you or has already mentioned, it's we are reconnected. We are one again. We have an intimacy that we never had before. We share physical intimacy, and it feels greater and better than it ever was before. And I can tell you that it's possible. It's possible, and don't give up, and stay patient as long as you can, and give God an opportunity to work in your spouse's heart, and to continue to work in your heart. And I know that I used to wake up every morning and pray for the ability to forgive Melinda for what she did yesterday. And then the next morning I'd wake up and I'd pray to forgive Melinda for what she had done the day before. And without those prayers, without God giving me the strength to hang on and to continue to fight for our marriage, we wouldn't be here today. So I want to stress that it can be better, and people's hearts can change, and the intimacy and the connection can be reestablished, even when it's a woman who steps out of the marriage.
And to that end, healing will happen in a circle of people. It can't happen behind closed doors of the home with just the husband and just the wife. Community is so critical to finding a source of healing. Isolation definitely contributed to the pain that we brought upon ourselves, and we are connected with other people today. We are helping other marriages today. We are involved in a marriage ministry at our church now, and trying to pour back into other people and give from something that could have, just been seen as the worst thing that could have ever happened in our lives. And instead of looking at it that way, we have taken those ashes, restored them to beauty through God, and we're able to stay plugged in with community. Can't do it without other people.
Yeah.